This is a short bite episode of Homeschool Together. Hello and welcome to Homeschool Together Short Bite Edition. Thanks so much for joining us. Today we're going to be reviewing another workbook. We've been on a line of workbooks. I've been finishing workbooks in our morning basket. We thought we'd start talking a little bit about these workbooks. I enjoy doing workbooks with my daughter. It's just like a great little thing that I can pull out of the morning basket, or I can pull out and give to her as kind of like a warm-up exercise.
Right. These are supplemental for our, with our main curriculums, and a good way to cover topics that we wouldn't otherwise get to do. And
Exactly.
In the case today, we're talking about handwriting, which is, a subject that we don't directly focus on. I mean, you are writing in the reading curriculum, and she is doing writing in math, but to really have some focus on it, we added this really cool little workbook. Yeah,
I found a lot of the workbook works, whether we're doing another subject like geography, or we're doing a STEM one now with Evan Moore as well. There's a lot of writing in those, and her handwriting has really come along, and I really like those books for like kind of maybe if you're thinking about using a workbook, using it to do both whatever the subject is that you might be already missing, but also as an exercise in handwriting, I think has been a kind of a revelation to me. And I think that it's almost funny, like a lot of these things that we're learning on the fly with our oldest, my youngest is going to, really benefit from the fact that, we're using our first as a guinea pig for a lot of stuff. I don't think our second one's going to do as much curriculum. I know for our older one, I've been doing a lot of individual
been trying a lot of things.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why we wanted to share too what we try and what we like and what seemed to work for us. And I think her handwriting, we've recently finished this handwriting book, and I feel like her handwriting has really come a long way in it. So we wanted to talk about it.
Yeah. So there's typically about two styles that most people know about. There's a print, which is kind of a blocky print. And then there's the standard cursive that I think we all remember us having to do in elementary school.
Right.
We've chosen to do this style called D'Nealian. So it's a D'Nealian, and we'll put that in the show notes. We'll actually put a link to the book that we use.
Yeah, this is called D'Nealian Handwriting.
Specifically, and it's by Scott Forsman.
Yeah, I think this is the only workbook for D'Nealian. Yeah. It's one that is difficult to find. So if you decide to go this route, just be prepared. There's like only one. We got this at Rainbow Resources, which I think is one of the only places that I've seen. I don't know if it's on Amazon, but we'll find a link and we'll put it in the show notes so you can see. So to kind of go over the basics between the differences. So print and cursive, as Matt said, there's always this debate. What do we teach our kids? Do we teach them how to do cursive? Do we teach them how to do print? Now, one of the first things everybody says is, well, we have to teach cursive. You have to be able to read the great documents of our country, and you have to be able to read letters to grandma and all these things, right? And so I just want to get it out of the way. Obviously, being able to write cursive and being able to read cursive are two different skills. They can be the same, I guess. If you learn to write it, then you can obviously read it. But we didn't want that to influence our decision directly. We can still teach our daughter how to read cursive, even if she doesn't know how to write it. So she can read letters. Her letters from grandma is a perfect example, because her grandmother, your mom, has beautiful cursive writing. And my Grammy has beautiful cursive that they both write to her. So that's definitely a need to be able to read cursive. So for us, I wasn't sure what to do. And I did a lot of research, and I was like, well, cursive is supposed to be better for getting fine motor skills, getting that looping and flow to your writing. And then, but printing is closer to what she's going to see in our reading texts and in early novels, early readers, all of that. That's all going to be printing. So it's like, is it going to be too difficult for us to teach our daughter cursive while she is learning to read in block printing, which I thought was going to be kind of a mismatch, maybe, and make our lives more difficult. So one of the things that I came across was D'Nealian, and the idea here is, and I think we used to learn how to print this way because it looks a lot like the handwriting that I did when I was in first grade.
Exactly, yeah. And the funny thing is, a lot of us will print, but we also blend with cursive.
I think that
out
that's
of
because,
efficiency.
but I think that
Yeah.
this is how we used to learn to write. I
Yes.
think that this is late 80s, early 90s. What it is it's a print, but then every letter has a tail.
Yeah.
So
There's a little loop at pretty much like a T or an I or
right,
an
they
N.
all
You can
have a
imagine
little
that little
tail.
draw up at the end.
Right, which is how I know that that's how I wrote because I have some of my old documents and
Yeah.
that's how I was writing when I was in school. So you're learning to print, but you have these tails, and then as the levels go on, I think it's at level 3, maybe third grade level, that then you connect the tails, and you do have to change a couple of letters, like Q, for example.
Yeah.
There's a few K. There's a few that the cursive letter doesn't look R, as much like the print letter, but for a lot of letters, it's just the idea of connecting them. And so by teaching D'Nealian, you make it easier for your child to go to cursive later. Yeah. And I thought that this was a perfect blend between teaching them printing, which is something that she can use right now with a reading curriculum, but then later she's all set for cursive without having to totally learn something totally different if she's into cursive at that time, either of our daughters. And if she's not, then they'll have pretty handwriting. Because personally, I think that the printing is really ugly as far as like a way to write as an adult. And I wanted them to have some sort of flow to their handwriting.
Yeah, I mean, there's always the aesthetics element, to the point where some people, they treat it almost like calligraphy, where it has to be
and
an
you
art.
certainly can.
Well, you absolutely can, but I think from the standpoint of what we're trying to do is just give her an efficient writing style that where she, if she is asked to do one or the other, for some reason, she can do that.
Right, and if cursive is something that interests her and she wants to learn how to write in cursive,
it wouldn't take much to get there.
Right, this is going to be a great. She's already going to have taken many of the steps on the path to cursive.
And I think even just from my own writing style, I tend to blend the two together.
Mm-hmm.
And
a lot of us do.
And I think a lot of us did this, if we went to college, we did a lot of note taking. It really drives efficiency in that respect. And you end up actually just writing in whatever's the most efficient manner to get the most down on the paper in the least amount of time. And I think a D'Nealian style handwriting is a decent approximation to that. But I really find that I use kind of a combination of these two, and if you just average all my letters together, it does look a lot like D'Nealian. And you're right, I think this was kind of the style that I remember in my teacher's second grade class.
Right, and maybe this was the steps that we took towards learning cursive because we both did learn cursive.
This may be a precursive kind of starting,
and it is. And so, but I like that we didn't just go with handwriting. So if you see handwriting programs out there like Handwriting Without Tears and some of the other ones, they're only going to have a print and a cursive. Yeah. And we wanted something in the middle so that we could have the option later. So that's the background behind why we went with D'Nealian.
Exactly. So, the preamble aside, the D'Nealian handwriting book, it's a pink book. It's got some, artwork on the front. I really felt that this was a good starting point for any young learner who is starting to work on handwriting. You can start, I think we started this, when she was 4.5. Really early in her handwriting. I think the only thing she knew how to write was maybe her name because of the Montessori.
We started some very early pages. We did this solidly through her kind of 5-year-old year because we started a little bit early and just helping her work on her penmanship. So can you go over the structure of the book?
Absolutely, yeah. So basically, at the start of the book, they really start from the basics. At first they're basically showing you how to sit. When you're writing, not slouched over.
How to hold your pencil.
How to hold your pencil. What's right-handed position? What's your left-handed position? So they actually help, you determine what you're going to do. And they gave some nice, pictures of kids. And, it actually looks a little dated too, like the image-wise. Looks like it was from the 90s. Like, wait a minute, is that Matt Bozza?
It's a throwback handwriting.
I know. Well, that's a nice number line on it. Anyway, so so they start there and they really get you kind of, they educate you as a parent, but also, the student, and they see pictures of other kids doing things. And I think that's very helpful. And then they really ease you into it. They start with like drawing circles, making lines, connecting things. They actually had this really cool one. It's like a maze where there was a path and you had to keep the pencil mark inside the path. So it was really training them.
They're working on that fine dexterity.
If you think that you're going to be thrown, the first 20 or 30 pages, they are not writing any letters. I think at the most they do start doing numbers. Actually, they think they start, if I
Yeah,
remember
because
it.
this is the Kinder book. I guess
Yeah,
we should
it
preface
actually
that.
starts with numbers, and there's these little activities that they get to do, like, oh, find the matching bird, and they have to draw a circle around it, or connect the dots, or try to draw this picture, and it's like a dinosaur, and my goodness, my daughter made a really nice dinosaur. Isn't that beautiful? I mean, no, it's terrible. But like little things like that, where they start you off, then they start to have you do like your finishing lines and your finishing letters. So they'll actually have like, for example, the letter Z, and you have the two horizontal slashes and the horizontal lines, and you have to connect the slash between the two of them.
Yeah, so they're doing part of the
Part
letter
of the
for
letters,
you.
yeah. The learner has to do that, and then once you get into the actual writing of letters or numbers, like for example numbers, the learner will actually have to write it maybe 30 times on the sheet. So if you want to, extend this book out, I mean, I think it's about 160 pages. So if you're imagining, okay, I want this to take 2 years, or I want this to take a year, and I want to go really slow, I'm not necessarily teaching them the letter sounds or the letter recognition. I just want them to practice. You can imagine doing half a sheet a day, or one page a day. You don't have to do every single page. I do know they noticed they had a little bit of a fluff in some of the pages, so it's not technically 160 pages. Once they start getting into the letters, so each letter, all 26 letters, both lowercase and uppercase, after you did the one page, then they had this huge drawing of the next letter. So it's kind of like you're losing, I don't know, you probably lost 40 pages just in the description of the letter, but it does show you how to draw the letter in like a huge, size 800 font. And then they have some like images. Let's say it's a U, it's like an umpire, an umbrella, that type of thing. They'll have some pictures around it.
Reinforce the sound.
Exactly. So also, whenever you're doing the letter writing or the number writing, they have some activities on those pages. Sometimes it's recognition of a word like igloo. So if you're on the letter I, you have the word igloo. Obviously my learner wasn't able to read that at the time, but there was a nice association with the image and the word. They have to then trace that word. A lot of times I asked her to write the word next to it. There's no space for that, but I actually had her trace the word and then write the same word again, just as an exercise of doing that, and just a practice of writing words that she doesn't know and that type of thing. I did find it, maybe it took about five minutes or so at the time to do one page. It wasn't really a big deal.
This was just part of our morning basket.
This was
she
a morning
would just
basket
do one,
exercise,
and then we would go ahead and have her practice extra writing. We've done whiteboard type writing with these letters. I also found I found a free online print sheet that was able to print D'Nealian. So I did like a sentence from Harry Potter that she could then copy.
Yeah, the copy work.
So we did some extra copy work as we got towards the end of this.
Yeah.
But how do you feel about it overall as a kindergarten introduction to handwriting?
Well, I think the book maybe $10 or something like that.
Yeah, I think
$15?
maybe less than $10. It was not very expensive.
Absolutely worth getting as an introduction. And if you want this to extend and you really want to hone it, you may tear the sheets out, laminate them, or you may buy 2 versions of the book and have them do it twice. I found when I finished this, I wanted to go on to something else. I wanted to go on to the next thing.
And now there's it's, because it's D'Nealian, we are limited in our resources.
Yeah.
There's a kinder book and then there's a first grade. So it's like...
So something I've been doing
You got to jump... there's nothing else in kinder but for us to make our own practice pages.
Yeah, with doing your own practice pages. Obviously, you can just buy a book of line paper like we have. You can have the learner practice that. And the funny thing is, we've been doing the 100 lesson Learn to Read in 100 Lessons book. At the end of every single lesson, there is a writing exercise, and I have a sheet that's always on whatever page we're on, where she has to write, like at the end of the the lesson, she'll have to write the letter S and the letter H 10 times each, right? Whatever it might be. I have found extending some of the D'Nealian work into that, so we're kind of blending the handwriting,
That's a good idea.
taking advantage of that, as well as the reading. And during the reading exercises, I thought that's been really helpful. She actually kind of looks forward to it as kind of a joke. She likes to use all the entire line. I'm trying to like save space. She's like, no, Daddy, I'm going to do it 100 times. And I used to get like, no, I told you to stop, but okay, yeah, go ahead, get some handwriting practice,
Yeah,
kid.
let's do some handwriting. I think copy work's important.
But yeah, other than that, like I wish there was another book we could go on to, something a little bit more, maybe writing letters. I would really like to know, maybe the people in the audience can let us know if they're, we have a lot of Charlotte Mason-y type of people, and they like to do a lot of copy work. And I wish there was a book where there was some fun copy work that she could do, like sort of like a workbook where.
Right, but it would need to be, the problem is it would need to be in D'Nealian style.
Yes.
And it's really difficult to find resources. I know there's some really good things on Teachers Pay Teachers and some other places, but the mainstream, when you talk about Logic of English or Handwriting Without Tears or any of these other, phonics-based programs that also incorporate handwriting, it's like print or cursive. And there is no, we are going a different path, and there are just less resources for it, which is one of the reasons why we wanted to talk about this book.
Yeah, but even beyond just the resources, I think just in general, I think having, if Evan Moore is listening, it would be really nice to have like a book of copy work that they could do on a daily basis where it gives you a paragraph. I've noticed I've leveraged some of the other workbooks that we're doing, such as the geography book. Obviously the Learn to Read in 100 Lessons, all about reading. I have been leveraging some of that to give her practice in writing words and writing sentences. Another thing that she's been doing with our Scholastic book, which is the sight words book that we're doing right now, we're about halfway through that. She has been writing the word. So for example, you get a new word this week was like will, right? And that's the sight word that she's got to learn, even though phonetically she could spell it out, but we're learning on, we're blending the two styles together. She writes the word on the line, copies it, and writes it. And then she's now starting to write sentences, like whatever she thinks. And I'm letting her misspell the words because she's just excited about it. But there again, she's also getting more copy work and practice work. I just wish there was like, I asked you that one time to print off like, a sentence from Harry Potter and she could read it.
Well, right. And that's exactly the way that, I've been reading Emily Cook's book about modern secular Charlotte Mason. And, one of the things that she talks about and uses in Build Your Library is to take books that you're reading, living books, and take sentences or paragraphs from there and use those for your copy work.
Yeah.
So taking the sentence from Harry Potter is exactly doing that exact thing. And so that's one of the reasons I think it would be difficult to get a really good like copy work type book, because the sentences in there wouldn't have any connection for your student. Whereas when she got to copy the word, you're a wizard, Harry, she was very excited about that because she knew that and there was a connection there. So I think it'd be difficult to make a workbook that would be good.
Yeah. And there's a lot of kids out there that, there's some kids that will just run out and be really good at something, whether it's reading or it's handwriting or it's math. But I think a lot of students need that. There's got to be a lot of repetition. There's got to be a lot of intrinsic motivation. There's got to be a lot of practice. And these type of activities are not necessarily knowledge-based. They're skills-based. And skills-based things need to be practiced.
Yeah.
Whether it's doing, long-form addition. You just got to practice that a lot of times to finally understand what you're doing. Or, writing words and whatnot. There's amount of time, like we've talked about this, like time on paper, time on in book, time in this. There's just an amount of work. There's got to be some investment from the student before they begin to master the thing. Like I'm just thinking about it. Like whenever I read a book, I'm reading, huge amounts of words really, really fast. And I'm watching, it's almost like I'm watching this happen in real time. And I think this is the thing that I'm, as a teacher, an educator, a mentor, first time I'm actually doing this with a young person, I'm realizing that these skills, while we take for granted their speaking and the speaking ability and them running around and chasing things and how quickly they learned how to do that, things like reading, things like writing, these are very difficult skills to learn.
Yeah.
And they do not happen overnight. And it does require a lot of work. And, coming to grips with that they don't learn these things overnight. And
they do take a lot of practice.
It does take a lot of practice. It does take a lot of time. And I'm being thoughtful in the materials that you choose.
Well, right. And one of the things I think was good about this one is, I think it's funny that the other program is called Handwriting Without Tears, because I think like, oh man, we've never had any even come close to tears with doing this book.
No.
I think it's very gentle.
It is a gentle book, yes.
You know, she's our daughter has never really had a big problem putting in the effort with this book because it's not very rigorous. At the same time, though,
I understand that there's some kids who would struggle with that.
But at the same time, I think because it's not very rigorous, you may want to add in other additional practice, right? There's 2 pages all on the letter Y, but then you're not going to see the letter Y again in this book, right? You're going to hit it once.
Yeah, you're doing one a week or whatever. I mean, that's half the year you only see it once.
I think you do need to supplement this book. It's a great way to teach them the beginning. And this is only a kinder book too. So
exactly.
But I mean, if you want the practice, this book is not going to go over the same letter, jump back to it multiple times. It's going to hit it once and then it's going to move on to the next letter. I mean, it'll hit it both, lowercase and uppercase, but each of those only for one page of practice. So know that. Otherwise, I think it's a nice book, and
it was absolutely fantastic. I enjoyed it a lot, and I think we started doing this really heavily before we did the morning basket. And in the last year or so, the morning basket, I think earlier this year, we put it into place like April or so sometime around there. It's now mid-November. I have really I've had my, come to Jesus moment with morning baskets and how important they are, at least from my standpoint.
Well, the way that you're using them, I think it depends. All families can use them differently.
Absolutely.
But the way that we're using them as a supplement to the main curriculum with getting in some of these extra skills we want to cover, telling time we already talked about, and now handwriting, it's really worked out nice for us. So.
Yeah. Yep. Anyway, it's been a little bit longer short bite, but we've been riffing more on the nature of learning, skills-based things, handwriting in general.
Yeah.
I really think that, as our learners get into that kindergarten, first grade level, when they are going to be asked to finally start to write things that are, grammatically correct, phonetically, spelled correctly, these are the little skills that you got to get in early.
Right, we can't ignore it.
Yeah, you can't ignore it. And I have seen the light on this and how important it is and how much time it takes and how much, how many hours they need to do to put in the work. It's like playing a sport. They need to learn how to dribble a basketball. If you can't play basketball, you can't dribble, although I wasn't a very good dribbler, but I played because they just threw it to me, and I was working close to the net.
This is like a long short bite.
Yes. But
we digress.
But just in general, I really am starting to see the benefit of a little bit of rigor and a little bit of perseverance through things that are difficult. Now, I understand that, you have some kids that they struggle with that, but these type of workbooks and doing this and getting these skills in place has really been an illuminating experience for me on the nature of teaching and the nature of the challenges at this age. So the D'Nealian Handwriting book and a lot more philosophizing, educationalizing than we normally do. But this has been an interesting. This is a really good book. We like the philosophy of D'Nealian, so hopefully you guys check it out.
Thanks so much for joining us today and making us a part of your homeschool journey. Please engage with us on social media. Join our Homeschool Together podcast group on Facebook and find us at Homeschool Together Podcast on Instagram. We'd love to hear your feedback, questions, and recommendations. Until next time,
happy homeschooling!